Namaskar and welcome to episode number 17 of Understanding Consciousness podcast. And today we are taking a pause to ponder on what we know about the problem of consciousness and what I personally feel about what I learned in the last 17 episodes from 0 to 16 and what are the old things that have come to my mind while I have been going through this research. So this is just a podcast for as a checkpoint, taking it easy, gathering ourselves, gathering all the resources, gathering all the thoughts, and portraying it at one place here at episode number 17. The first thing that I really fascinated, first of all, I'm a big fan of Very Bad Wizards podcast, and yesterday I heard their latest episode, which is on split brain patients. The last two episodes of that podcast have been about consciousness. Actually, the first one, the second to last one, was about Thomas Nagel's famous essay called "What Is It Like to Be a Bat" or something like that. It's about consciousness, about the hard problem of consciousness. And the latest episode is about the split brain patients. For those who don't know what split brain patients is, what happened was in the 1950s, they had a new breakthrough in breakthroughs are always new. They had a breakthrough in curing people's epilepsy. This one specific form of epilepsy, which was really dangerous to the patients. And the full brain epilepsy or something like that, where the whole brain, the left and the right hemisphere, are both involved in epileptic seizures. And they found a way, so the left part and the right part of the brain are connected by this very tiny bridge called the corpus callosum. And they realized that if they just cut the corpus callosum and separate the left and right hemispheres of the brain physically, the seizures stop. And they were like, wow, this is a great great operation, great procedure and cure to fix the problem where a person's mind would, if untreated, become really a mush, because epileptic seizures, depending on what they are, can be really damaging to the neuropsychology. I mean, the physical and the mental part, I don't know. But what they realized quite late actually was that these patients were not normal. There was something different about them when, after post surgery, when left and right hemispheres are separate. It took a long time to realize that, because people behave normally, even with all that. They behave normally. Those people with split brain, they from the outside they feel very normal and stable. But if you do some experiments on them, you realize that both sides of the brain are not actually communicating, and there are most definitely two different centers of consciousness, two different the left. You can do these interesting experiments where you can show the left, because the left part of the brain is controlling the right side of the body and the right part of the brain is controlling the left side of the body. There are these experiments where you can show something, a word or an image, to the left eye and show another image to the right eye, and then they would the what are the specific experiments? I don't remember much, but you can imagine that you can do a lot of interesting experiments, right? You can ask the left side of the brain using the left ear, the right ear, and the right side of the brain by using the left ear. You can ask them a question, or you can show them a written question with just one eye, and you can feed these informations to just one part of the brain, and you can do these experiments, and they realize that there is a strange this is a strange phenomenon, and nobody can figure out whether they have two centers of consciousness or one center of consciousness, or what is going on. Are they communicating? They're definitely not communicating in those patients. But the point is, the point that some people put forth is, even in normal people like you and me, the corpus callosum is not not a very strong bandwidth bridge. Only some information can pass through between the left and right hemisphere, right? It's not all information from the left part goes into the right hemisphere, and vice versa. So what makes us say that we are all unified? Do we also have two different centers of consciousness, or whatever that be? Are we fully bound together? That binding problem that we had started this podcast with, the electromagnetic wave theory of electromagnetic field theory of consciousness, which solves the binding problem easily. In that case, it will be very easy to see that, okay, still at least it's still bound together because it's EM waves. But if you consider the psychoneural theory of consciousness, that is just a result of information processing. Clearly, there is no information processing between those hemispheres. So, are there two consciousnesses? Or do we also have a separate hidden conscious, which is a conscious side, which is just looking around and trying to figure out what to do, what to say? A lot of experiments are very eye-opening about the nature of such division. So there were these interesting things that came to my mind. That podcast is fascinating. This latest episode is so good. It's so interesting that I had to stop this paper for one episode and just talk about that. They say this thing, which is, the self is like the center of gravity. They are quoting someone else. These two people, Tamler, Sommers, and David Pizarro. They're both. One is a psychologist, one is a philosopher, and they quote someone saying that self is like the center of gravity, in the sense that a body's center of gravity is not something you can reduce the whole thing into. It's a conceptual thing. There's no real center of gravity where the whole the physical equation doesn't check the center of gravity of each body and then behave accordingly. The gravitational force does its work on all atoms equally, and as it turns out, the emergent phenomenon is this fact that the center of gravity is important. Why is something not falling over? Because the center of gravity is low. You can say that. That's a valid reason. That's a valid theory to explain some phenomenon that you came across. But it is not something real in the realist sense, but it is still real. It is a culmination of the whole body's behavior. And so is the self in a way. There is no one place where the self can be. We are we are continuously selfing. It's a verb. We are going through these moments where we feel like a self in one moment, like one self, and in another moment like a different self. And that was really fascinating to me. That you can think of the self in that way. This is all this I wanted to talk about, but the most interesting thing that I wanted to talk about, that came to my mind yesterday after all that, was a few years ago I came across this research by this professor called David Eagleman, not Eagleman, Eagleman, David Eagleman. And this research is about the fact that your brain can learn new things through this subconscious layer. You can teach blind people to see or deaf people to hear using this vest with vibratory motors on it. The procedure is like that. You have this vest prepared which has these vibratory motors on the whole backside of that vest, and the deaf person wears that vest, and there is a device that hears all the sound that is coming from the environment, and it converts it into patterns of vibration on your back, and you use those vibrations. Your mind, initially it won't make any sense, right? Initially, when the first time the wearer wears it would be random bits of info, right? But slowly, if you train properly, and this is how the training goes, the person sees a word written in front of him on a screen, and he or she hears a voice saying that word, and that sound is then converted into waves, and it's fed through these motors. And the mind slowly, as you keep on doing it, these multiple words all through the day, in a few weeks, the deaf person will get a feeling of what the word is just by these vibrations. And it's one of the most fascinating phenomenon I have come across, that a brain can subconsciously learn new sensory data and make sense of that sensory data, make models on it, and then have a perceptory response, have a perception of. The brain can create the perception of hearing. Who knows what they are perceiving at that moment? Are they actually perceiving the sound, or are their mind feeling it through body sensations? Or I don't know what's happening. It's very fascinating. I think there is something here that needs to be understood by consciousness researchers. The fact that new sensory percepts are being formed where none existed before is very, very interesting, and can tell us something about the way the mind creates perception. And this guy David Eagleman, he goes on to explain that you can actually feed it any data. You can actually feed magnetic fields, right? Somehow the orientation of the magnetic field of the earth can be fed into a bracelet in your hand, and in the sense that it can always point, it'll always vibrate towards the North Pole or whatever. And what happens is slowly your mind learns that way, which side is the North Pole. And I'm fascinated by the fact that what would the mind create the perception as, if it even does, you can feed it the market data, the stock market data, the mind. You can feed the mind the stock market data and figure out what comes out of it, what the mind says to sell or to buy. Ask them questions about actual financial decisions. All this is very fascinating, and here is where I really this is an idea that I had a few years ago, and I'm saying it, I'm sharing it for the first time, and maybe it's a stupid idea, maybe it doesn't work, but I think it's worth trying. We can use something like this in order to make a bridge between different conscious minds, right? You and me can sit and take in the same data through these vests, vibratory vests. We can share each other's inner mental states through these vests and maybe train on it, maybe make our brains train on that data, on the new data, and maybe there is a chance that we can communicate without using words, just using thoughts and feelings, right? There's definitely some kind of communication, some kind of information exchange happening through this channel of vibratory motors. We can use it in a different, we can have different technological solutions to this. There is another one where a blind person keeps this thing in the mouth, on the tongue, because the tongue is very sensitive. The back is not very sensitive, right? You cannot have the motors quite close together. The vibratory motors cannot be very close together because it will be hard for the back muscles or the back nerves to distinguish between two different motor activations. But the tongue is exceptionally sensitive, and this is one of the devices this lab, or maybe some other lab, created, where you have this chip on your tongue, and it creates these bubbly sensations as if you're drinking some soda. And the difference is that soda can be random activated feelings on your tongue, while this chip will have, of course, the inputs from the visual aspect of the things, like, because visual data is much more bandwidth than audible auditory data. It's interesting to see how people, and I think some people can learn to see rudimentary things from the outside world through this process. So there are different technological solutions, and I'm just fascinated by this possibility that we can do this. And this is, if you go back and see my motivation to understand this, to read this, to learn about consciousness, it comes from a sense of trying to communicate with other people without using language. Why? Because there's nothing wrong with language, just that it's I personally feel some things are lost by just using language. Some earnestness and some um, connection, primal connection is lost, because most of our history as social beings lies before we created spoken language, right? Our nearest ancestors use very rudimentary language. Oh, not ancestors, just cousins, our nearest cousins, the rest of the ape family. They might use some language, of course. They use shouts and screams and maybe some words are which we don't understand, but it's not as complex language. It's a rudimentary simple language, and maybe that forces them to use body language more. And in today's political climate, that's a worthwhile endeavor to have, if you can use all this technology that we have created to go back to the roots of communication. We have all these things. We have it in our culture through sound, through music, and I think music is one of those things. Music is this technology where we feel the same way, and we are kind of sure that we are feeling it the same way when we are together dancing, or when we are together singing, or when we are in a drum circle and it's 2 hours into the drum circle and everyone is exhausted but they are into it, and then it creates this feeling. It's in capoeira. I do capoeira, and we have these hodas, and in the hodas, in the circle, and when we have festivals, everyone is together and exhausted, but we are not communicating apart from singing and dancing and playing capoeira. And it's one of the most connecting things you come across, the most so the point is, we already have these technologies in our cultures. All we need to do is add the 21st century technology into the mix and see if we can create something which helps us. And I don't know what to do with this. I'm really excited with this revelation, and I thought I'll just put it on the podcast. Episode number 17. Thanks for listening, and we will be back to normal research tomorrow, or maybe even today, because I haven't read anything. I've just had this thought and I just wanted to make a podcast episode. Thanks for listening, and see you tomorrow.